So we're here today with Nazia Khatun. We're going to have a very loaded chat about self-love, about obsessions, what else?
Addiction.
And yeah, a lot more. I'm Julian Solai and this is The Way of the World. So who's Nazia Khatun?
I use neuroscience and fitness, and it's helping people champion mental health and self-love. I've been doing that for the last 10 years, and I help people or females from a South Asian background become the best version of themselves by using fitness as a tool. That's my job title. That's what I do for my career. But who is Nazia? Somebody who's playful, somebody who's loving, somebody who's just here to show up in the world, to do what she loves. That's who I really am.
So what was your journey through fitness? How did you get to do what you do? Because obviously it's not that common, right?
I feel like it's more common now than ever before. You asked me earlier how old I am.
How old are you?
I'm going to be 40 this year.
40? No way.
I am. Julian thought I was 28?
26, 27?
26. It's good. It's good. Bangladeshi genes. But it's also having a good approach to life as well. I guess it keeps you a bit younger, and water and skincare. And do you want the recipe?
Yeah, why not? Why not at this point?
Well, I guess the journey to get where I am, bearing in mind I come from a very, how do we say, volatile background in terms of...
Were you born in London? Or?
Yeah. We come from a culture where we don't encourage our females to do things that are fitness related or anything that's a bit out of the norm or out of the cultural norm, shall I say. But my journey started way back when I was probably 15, 16, going through an eating disorder. And that eating disorder presented itself as starvation, anorexia, as we call it clinically now, bulimia, then binge eating. And then I had a horrible addiction to the gym growing up. And when you understand addiction, you go from one thing to another, obsessive behavior. Then I think I got obsessed with the gym way too much, and I fell into boxing. I was an amateur boxer for a good 10 years in my early 20s. And I slipped into what we call the darkness of depression and suicidal thoughts. I speak about it very openly, so I'm not attached to it anymore. But there are some sore points that I have that I try to avoid. But it's also important to share the story so people understand where we all come from as humans and how to heal and actually how to stop the suffering maybe. But it was in my depression years I decided to also create the brand Fitness Reborn. And since then, it's just been learning. I wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur yet because I'm still learning. And my journey has been very different compared to what I would say maybe people who can snap into IG, create content, do this. Because we didn't have IG back in those, like 11 years ago, 10 years ago, like we do now. So getting to here has been crazy. So but I'm here now, so that's all that matters.
There's a lot there that I'd like to explore, obviously,
Sure.
with your permission. But
Of course.
I'm quite interested in your story in terms of, getting through a period of deep depression and being or feeling suicidal. Do you want to share a little bit about that, how that came through? What was the thought process or a particular circumstance that...
Yeah, I mean, if I was to just give you an overview of it, last year was the year where I literally did a lot of therapy work. I took 6-7 months out just to work on myself. And I wished I had the opportunity or the chance or the ability to do it many years ago. But the healing process has happened in chunks for me. The inner work, the shadow work, the understanding the self, the ego, you, the human and everything. I guess I would say a lot of it had to do with being a people pleaser, satisfying the status quo, family, parents. I'm the eldest out of 6 siblings. That's a huge responsibility in itself. And then being a daughter as well, the expectation from my parents to be married, the typical Bangladeshi, the typical South Asian expectations. And I think at some points of my life, I just felt like I wasn't doing what my parents wanted me to do. I was very rebellious growing up, and it helps. Rebellious people help change the status quo, and they change the normality of things, if you know what I mean. But at the time, it was a deep fight of, I want to be this person, and my parents wanted me to be this person, and so did the society and the culture I live in. And straying away from it, I guess it came with a cost as well. And that was my mental health. Not being married, or not wanting to get married to the people that my parents wanted me to get married to. And standing up for myself as well. So when you're a woman with a voice, it can be interpreted in a way where you're constantly fighting. But that wasn't it. I was trying to create my own identity for myself. Like, deep down, we all know who we want to be, but we're not given the chance to explore it. I was an amateur boxer for like a good 10 years. And again, that was coming off what I used to always hear: Asian girls don't box. Now you see it everywhere. Back then you didn't. So I was one of the few handful of females in Peacock Gym, and Asian and a Muslim female as well, from a Bangladeshi background. So that was another whole platform of craziness. Females don't box. Bangladeshis don't box. Muslim females don't box. Who will marry you? That's all I kept hearing from anybody that was remotely from my background. So that created a bit of a internal issue for me as well. And that created a horrible relationship with my belief system. Like, who will marry me? Like, from a Bangladeshi background as well. And it was at 28, I had a career change. I used to work in an office. I did a degree in sociology. I was expected to work in offices for the rest of my life, and it was just boring. I hated the office job. I had more office jobs than hot dinners in my 20s, okay? Because I was fighting to get out there, always itching to get into the gym. That's what gave me a lot of pleasure, a lot of happiness, and especially when I was boxing. It was joy. It was just the joy of my life. And I guess by 28, transitioning from the office job, trying to become a fitness coach, I literally went into the deep end without having a clue what the other side was about. I stopped boxing. So you can imagine all the dopamine, the natural happy chemicals that I had in a group setting was all gone. And by the time I was 30, I wasn't married. There was no signs of me getting married. So it all just crumbled. I haven't got a job. I'm not doing what my parents wanted me to do. I'm not married. It's scary times. I'm going to be 30. And depression just slipped. I don't know how the hell I slipped into depression, but I think I managed to catch myself at the right time and realizing, oh crap, it's gone too far. I only knew it went too far when I started having suicidal thoughts. So I didn't try anything silly. Like, you know, we lose people to mental health. So I'm one of the lucky ones. So I would say that's an overview of it. But it's a lot more deeper than that, obviously. But
the thing about suicidal thoughts is that it's almost like there is a part of ourselves that we're unable to live with anymore. So the will that we experience to die is the will for this part of ourselves to kind of, you know, push it away and separate from it. So it's funny that, you know, that you called your program Reborn. That's the name, right?
yeah.
So you almost went through some sort of rebirth from that point onwards. So do you feel like there was then a part of yourself, perhaps the one that was connected to wanting to please your parents or wanting to please your cultural background, that you kind of have to get rid of?
I mean, I love my culture. Bangladeshi culture is very colorful. Our people are very loving. Our food is very rich. And with every culture that we have on planet Earth, it all comes with the good and the highs and the bad and the flaws, right? One of the flaws that we have is people pleasing, the expectations that you have to be this way and that way. So I had to detach from that, detachment from, oh, you have to be a certain age to be this person, that person, established by this, have children by this age. And that's just a linear narrative that we're born in, right? And for me, that wasn't who I wanted to be. There was more to life. There was more to explore. Whether you're traveling, whether you're following your passion, whether you're pursuing your dream, we're not encouraged to pursue dreams, right? And one of the things when I went through depression, I had psychological issues. If you're going through an eating disorder, that's a mental health issue. Okay, let's call it as it is. But it's not something I paid attention to. because we didn't have articles, we didn't have media, Instagram posts to teach us what is an eating disorder, what is an addiction, do you see? So one of the things that I know, and I still believe this, if it wasn't for the gym, if it wasn't for my workouts, I would have been a very different person. I would have definitely slipped down a very bad path. I don't know, right? But the gym was the place that I would say that helped me become a better version of myself. I know there's another part of it I would like to explore in this conversation about the coping mechanism and the addiction that nobody speaks about. The gym was a place that saved me from myself, you know. Luckily, I didn't go to drugs, alcohol, you know, or anything that could have harmed me in a very dangerous way.
It was your constructive outlet.
Yeah, yeah. And the Fitness Reborn was, it came to me once when I realized every morning I'm waking up with these horrible, depressed, negative thoughts about the world, about myself. I hate myself. But once I'm in that gym, and it didn't matter if I spent 3 hours in that gym during those times when I was going through hardship, at the end of those 3 hours, I felt better. For that remote 5 minutes, I felt good about myself. Because obviously I'm accessing the happy chemicals, the feeling good about myself. I'm doing something in the gym to give me that rush of feeling, you know, getting rid of, the endorphin high, the dopamine high. And that's where the name Fitness Reborn came from. And this is why I teach my clients now, that fitness used as a positive tool can help us all become the best version of ourselves, and it can enhance our life in so many ways as well. Yeah.
So you talked about coping mechanisms, you talked about addictions.
Yeah.
So obviously with the addiction itself is a coping mechanism,
Yeah.
right? One of the great things about your journey is that you managed to turn something that was in a way that you were using in a destructive way, you managed to turn that around in a very constructive way. So do you want to tell me a little bit about that process?
So if we understand addictions, when we look at it, is seen as somebody who's obsessed with drugs, alcohol, porn. It could be eating food is the most addiction that we have that's accessible to us as well. And because we see gym as a positive thing, everybody raves on about the gym as the best thing alive. But if you were to speak to most of the people in the gym, that's some of their coping mechanism. And I used it to the point where it was harming me. It was creating more mental health issues. And it was about 5-6 years ago, I realized, obviously you go through phases. And as I'm growing as well, my body's changing, my energy's changing, my mindset's changing as well. And I realized I wasn't taking any rest days. And as a woman, we go through a menstrual cycle. We go through 7 days of changes in our body. And because we haven't been taught how to relax and take days off, and the hustle and the grind culture really gets you to you sometimes, and everybody's doing something, so you got to keep up. And it was just this moment I had, I was like, damn, I'm actually exhausted. I can't put my energy in the relationships. I can't put my energy at home. I'm not focused at work. I'm just floating by. And I just don't know. I had a moment where I was like, whoa, this has become a horrible addiction for me now. What served me back then is no longer serving me now. And I chased the physique. And, as a boxer, you got to keep up with the demands of training. They catch up. You eventually caught up. Like injuries, understanding that you're not coping with that exercise and everything. So once I became aware of that, I started doing things in a very different way. And if you don't change the way you do things, it just becomes a part of you. And I was like, okay, I want to have children. I know for a fact, if I keep going like this, I'm going to create something that's going to be detrimental for me for the future. When I get married, I want to be able to have time with my husband or the person I'm going to be spending the rest of my life with. What happens when I can't go to the gym? What happens when I can't have access to the gym? Because my child needs me. And something turned in me and I thought, okay, I need help with this. And I hired coaches, somebody who could keep me accountable for my rest days. I literally had to pencil down in my diary, freaking rest on a Tuesday or a Saturday. And if anybody was around me, they had to keep me accountable as well, because it's an automatic behavior for me. Wake up, get in the gym. That's my routine. It has been for the last 10 years. And in the last 3 years, it's been fascinating just by taking those regimental rest days, how much improvement I have seen in my own mental health again. Like I'm coping better. I don't use the gym as a coping mechanism. Like I can take a whole month off and I'll be fine, right?
Because the thing is this, right? So the addiction is a coping mechanism. What are you?
So
What are you coping
right. So
with?
Gabor Mate says this beautifully. And I said this in so many of my talks when I've done guest speaking and everything. Feel sorry for anybody who has an addiction. It doesn't matter what their addiction is. They're trying to escape their trauma, right? So if you look deep behind what I'm saying to you, I'm trying to run away from a trauma. There's an unresolved conflict that I haven't looked at. Last year when I dwelled into my therapy work, so much came out. Like some of my personal issues that I had, whether it was relationships. Why did I have an eating disorder? Who taught me to have an eating disorder? Like I had to look at the root cause of it all. If you don't look at the root cause and you don't fix the root cause, all you're doing is having these mechanisms in place to get you by through the day. And it's a classic syndrome, like I saw with some of my clients and I see on a daily basis. It catches up. Like if you have suppressed emotions, it becomes repressed, and those repressed emotions then becomes depression, right? The depression is volcano stages because you haven't looked after all the other emotions that's been presented to you because you dealt with it in an angry way. You've had a tantrum or you've gone to the gym to hit bags, and that's the only way you took care of that emotion. But emotions were given to us to actually explore it, to find out what's going on. And the classic example I say to people who work with me, if you have a child, would you ignore that child when that child is crying? And the answer is no. As a mom, you will look after that child. Is my child hungry? Does it need a change? Is a child hurt? But when we are upset as adults, we forget how to cater to that inner child. But it's the inner child that's wanting the attention or being catered for. And some of the things we as adults, we forget. How we were nurtured as children is what we're looking for or seeking as adults, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I'm the eldest out of my siblings. So, and there's twins after me, okay? I was barely 10 months old when the twins came in. There is no way my mom would have been able to give me all the attention when the twins came into her life. Absolutely no way, okay? So the attention I got growing up was probably negative feedback. And that played into my life as a teenager, as an adult. I had to be the role model. If I did anything wrong, it will backfire on me. I'll get beats for them and I'll get beats for me as well. And that showed in my behavior and some of my habits that I had growing up. The need for attention. I was a boxer. That wasn't by accident. That's a showman's sport, right? Like, look at me, I'm great at this. Look at me. Not that I did it consciously. It was a very subconscious pull, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of it's very symbolic in so many ways because you could also say that you were fighting for the love and the attention of your parents. No, I can definitely relate to that 100%.
Yeah.
My younger brother was born 15 months after me. Mm-hmm. So my mom didn't even have enough milk to actually breastfeed me completely. Mm. So I totally get it. Going back to the coping mechanism, then what really happened is that other than obviously scheduling your rest days and all of that, that was a byproduct of the fact that you were working on yourself and your traumas and kind of, just elaborating all of that to then be able to not having to necessarily cope with something as much. Would you say that's true, or is there any other way that you're coping with things right now that perhaps you're being a bit more conscious of doing it in a constructive way? Because I have an art background, right? I have a music background, and a lot of my traumas and a lot of like artists' traumas really serve the purpose of producing good art, right? And in a way, you could say that is a coping mechanism. It's the way that I like to look at this is that there are constructive ways to cope with the pain, and there are destructive ways to cope with the pain. So could definitely relate to what you were saying about the gym and how you managed to turn that into from being destructive to being constructive. So what were you going to say?
So the healing process happened probably after the depression years. And it was a penny drop moment when I realized I didn't feel good enough about myself in whatever I did. And that's been the poison that I carried for why my eating disorders happened. Because I was trying to prove myself to people around me. Getting validation from men because you want to be seen as pretty and beautiful. I never felt pretty when I was growing up. I had the classic syndrome of I'm fat and ugly, body dysmorphia. It didn't matter how many guys, I had a lot of attention growing up without realizing it, right? But when I went home and I looked in the mirror, you're brushing your hair and you're like, I'm fat and I'm ugly because you were once fat and that stays in you. And when I realized that's the thing I was carrying, that's the energy I was carrying, I had to go on a self-love journey. And I know it sounds so cliche, self-love. If you don't love yourself, nobody else will love you. But the way you treat yourself and the way you show up in the world is exactly how the universe responds back to you, right? When you feel good about yourself, people become attracted to you just because of your energy. And there were so many things I did. One of my most amazing turning points was a gratitude list, writing down gratitude lists. Like to be grateful for the things I have, like about my body, like acceptance of who I am, acceptance of my frizzy hair, my weird face shape or my weird nose. The things that I still hate about myself, I had to be grateful for it because most people didn't have it. And over time, and I still do a gratitude list every single morning. I'm practicing one at night now just to get into the habit of it. And what gratitude, and there's so many articles about gratitude and how it changes the brain chemicals. There's a part in your brain called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is responsible for your bodily functions, sleep, appetite, body temperature, everything. And they found people who actually are feeling grateful about the current situation or anything, like feeling grateful, you release dopamine. We go to the gym to access that, right? But just writing a gratitude list or meditating on gratitude can give you that access to the dopamine. And nowadays, because we're constantly on our phone, we kill the dopamine levels in our brain. So we're constantly seeking for one thing to another to make us feel happy. So gratitude list was one of those things that really changed the way I thought about myself. It rewired the subconscious mind, but it was work every single day. It was work in progress. And then I had to tweak up doing self-talk in the mirror, right? Like, I know it sounds so silly. Oh, Nazia, you're amazing. You're beautiful. Affirmations, I'm good enough. I feel good today. And it's a feeling that you're chasing. And doing a whole body scan. And slowly, you don't realize it. You started doing things in a very different way. Like for me, I encourage my female clients to take themselves on a self-love day, to take good care of their appearance, to make sure they are in good shape. Because when you're not in good shape, according to yourself, you end up projecting that energy off to the world and to other people. When you go to work, you're carrying that stagnant energy. Life's too short to be carrying around stagnant energy. You're here to show up. You're here to glow. And people think, oh, if you talk a certain way, you're arrogant or you think you're too full of yourself. Yeah, I am. I am full of myself because nobody else is going to be putting that water in the cup for me. I'm going to own that. And when I was young, I used to be very shy about it. Like I was so shy of owning the fact that maybe I am beautiful or maybe I am pretty. But nobody told me that growing up. So I have to now teach myself. So you're either with me or you get out of the way. So when I teach my clients, it's all about having an attitude about who you are and owning it, right? When you own it, people want to know how you did it. People want to know, how are you so confident? And that's another key word that we have, being confident. So many of my clients lack confidence. And we are good at in certain things, but we're not good at other things. So it all has to add up somewhere along the line. And I studied neuroscience and fitness together. So that really helped a lot as well, making me who I am.
What I'm personally interested in is what you then do with the stuff that is unresolved. Because for me, one thing that I can clearly see that, perhaps I'm sure you're conscious of it, but perhaps you're not necessarily expressing now is the fact that really what helped you the most with everything else was gaining awareness about what was going on with you. So, you know, I think, you know, practicing like gratitude and, you know, and using all the tools that, you know, you have to kind of help yourself, you know, gain more confidence and love yourself a bit more. I think that's all amazing. But I feel like for the majority of people, at least, like you're very self-aware, I'm very self-aware, someone else might be, but I think the majority of people don't really know what's wrong with them. So
Exactly.
I think for them, you know, to have some sort of, you know, platform or just someone that can help them
Yeah.
just realize what is actually going on might be helpful, you know, beyond measure with.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful question, Julian, because I have a saying, and that saying is most of us are walking around without realizing what our wounds are. Yeah. What our pains are. The people who haven't paid attention or become aware. When you get triggered, right, that's your awareness that something's happening in the background, a trigger. You can have negative triggers or you can have a positive trigger, right? Instead of ignoring that trigger, sit with that emotion. Find out why it bothered you. Find out what he or she said to you. Why did you get so annoyed? Why did you get so defensive? I used to get very defensive when somebody used to tell me, like my sisters, when they used to tell me about myself. I used to hate it because I was hiding away from who I was. I needed help, but I didn't want to face it. My mum used to trigger me a lot. My father used to trigger me a lot.
How is that now?
So much more calmer because I've gone and done the therapy work. I've done the inner work. I've done the shadow work, right? So when you become aware of it, when you ignore it, that's when people get into trouble. And then it catches up. And people could be 50, 60, thinking that's who they are. That's who I've been all my life. I can't change. But the brain is neuroplastic. Neuroplasticity means you can change at any time. And the beautiful thing about the brain as well is from the ages of birth to 7, that's when the programming starts. A child is in theta brainwave, right? That's where the
I
subconscious
think it
brain.
starts even before that, but fair
It
enough.
starts in the 3rd trimester of a mum's pregnancy, right? That's where the child is being programmed. From up till about 25 years old, your prefrontal cortex is still being formed, right? These are your fundamental years, right, to understand who you want to be. And you can program yourself to becoming amazing if only you were taught how to do it. After 25 till 32, we slowly become stuck in our ways. So I see it with my clients. The ones that are under 25, so easy to change. 25 to 32 is still great, but after 32, it just becomes a lot more harder because we get stuck in our habits and our ways. So to understand that your thoughts become a feeling, your feelings then become a reality, you can take control of the thought. And I learned this the hard way. When you have a bad day, how do you shift from a bad feeling to a positive feeling? Your perspective on yourself and the world has to change. But because we carry so much pain within us, the wounds, the unresolved conflict, the trauma, we see through that lens. And that lens then just becomes a part of our life, our world. I said to my client this morning, if you do not like looking at yourself in the mirror and you hate yourself, there's a 100% chance you're not going to see any beauty out in the world. And we did this whole exercise. She's envious, she's jealous, she gets angry, she feels left behind. I go, this is exactly what I meant. Change how you look at yourself first, your self-image, and then the world looks different. It's like the windows got cleaned.
So what would
after.
be the first step to change your own perspective of yourself?
Change the idea that you have about yourself.
And how would you go about that?
So my idea of myself growing up was I'm fat and ugly. I had to change the idea. And the idea was, no, you're actually beautiful and you are amazing. Language. Language has a huge impact on your brain and language has a huge impact on your body. And you know this because you train, you're a bodybuilder, right? How you talk to
Am
yourself.
I?
Are you a
I
bodybuilder?
don't think I am, but fair enough.
Oh, please, Julian, stop it.
I'm really not.
Made out of steel.
No.
Like when you are training in the gym, you have to talk to yourself to do that last rep. You have to do a lot of self-talk and belief in yourself that you're going to do that last rep. And you have a vision of yourself, how you want to look like, right? And I've seen your transformation, right? It's amazing. So people have to change the idea, the concept they have about themselves. I had a horrible thought process, my self-limiting beliefs, and my belief system. I never believed in myself. It took me years to believe in my power, to believe in my work, to believe in my brand. The moment I started believing in myself, all the opportunities came to me. But if I didn't believe in myself and I didn't change and have an identity shift, I still be that Nazia that's walking around with it. I'm ugly and I'm fat and body dysmorphia. It's not worth it. It's really not worth it.
Yeah, 100%. Personally, I'm a strong believer that confidence comes from evidence. And I do think that obviously, taking your journey as an example, the more you were changing your opinion of yourself and the more the world around you was responding to that, but it's also vice versa. The more the world is responding, and that obviously makes it easier to just kind of power through that journey of changing your perspective of yourself. And and that's what I call re-identification. And it's actually one of the things that we go through with a lot of our clients, because the moment that they change their body composition to an extent that the world around them just starts to respond differently, they also have to go through a period of re-identification, which is painful in its own ways, because it also means letting go of certain relationships, of certain friendships, or just changing the way that they relate to other people. But I think it's a great thing. So if someone listening to this having very limiting self-beliefs, having a lot of self-hatred, what would you say to them as first step?
Look, all of our root issues with self-limiting beliefs and not believing in ourselves comes from how we were nurtured, okay? And you can't change the way you were nurtured by your parents. Our parents were going through survival mode, autopilot mode. But what you can do is reparent yourself. Like I did months of inner child work. Anytime I used to have horrible anxiety, by the way. Every morning I'll wake up hyperventilating. Like breath work is another thing that people need to take on board just to calm themselves down. The central nervous system, the vagus nerves and all that stuff. These are things that's all out there on the YouTube and stuff. But you have to do a lot of inner child work, right? And it's hard because the two caretakers, the caregivers that were meant to look after you and love you, they didn't do it properly. And they weren't given a manual to parent, okay? And one of the most crazy...
Where are you at personally with the forgiveness side of things? Because obviously, first step is actually being able to recognize what happened. And this gives me the opportunity to have some sort of more truthful, not even objective, but more truthful perspective on what actually happened. And this means that all of a sudden my parents are human beings.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand that it wasn't necessarily, their fault with how things went. Great. And that also kind of frees me up a little bit with all the hatred that I felt towards myself for having hated on them or for having felt the way that I felt towards them, right?
Yeah.
But then the step after that, having all that awareness and perhaps having to kind of resize things in your head, is being able to forgive. So where are you at with that?
Forgiveness is the most hardest thing. But forgiving yourself is also very tricky. And again, I don't know where I am with it because it's a process, right? I mean, I love my parents now more than I had ever loved them in my 20s. They were number one enemy for me in my 20s. I hated my parents.
Yeah, of course.
Like, not hate as in, like extreme hate, but there was no connection with them. And I always felt like, they love the other ones more than me. And I'm always getting told off. And that's how I interpreted their love for me in different ways. Or not their love. And I think when you truly understand you've moved on from that place, is the things that used to trigger you no longer trigger you anymore. Like my mum can talk about marriage. I can feel something, but I won't explode at her. I won't get wound up about it. Okay? Because that's her fear. I can't rationalize it. Right? By my age, she was having like 1,000 kids. All right, yes, mom, well done, great. Your day and time was different to mine now. Do you see? So we were given a task to do at a program that I did a couple of weeks ago. And it was doing a brain dump to each one of our parents. And my one started with my father. We have father wounds and mother wounds, right? And I had to just do a dump of everything that negative came up about my father. And then at the end, you have to write a letter of love. Everything that you love about this person. And you have to connect with them. You either give it to them or you throw it in the water so you get rid of it. And I've still got this letter in my bag. Because I have an opportunity to tell my dad I love him. I have an opportunity to tell my mom I love her. Because they did the best that they could with what they had. And that's when you truly know that something has truly shifted, that you have no resentment in your body. There is no anger. There is no, oh, you could have done better. Oh, I didn't get this from you, this and that for you. Knowing that when I am a parent, I'm going to be a better parent and I'm going to be going through a process where I've healed. So my child has a better chance of not taking all of this through my whole DNA and everything because it gets passed down. So again, to answer your question, it's not just a straight path of, oh yeah, I'm here. Because tomorrow something might come up and I could go back straight to stage one. But it's just every day you have to work on it. Every day you have to see yourself as a calm person, as a person that's living in the moment, in the present moment. You're no longer in the past. So yeah, that's where it is at the moment for me. But I feel like I'm still going through a transition process at the moment. And every day is interesting to see what's coming out of it.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the gratitude, it just made me smile what you said because, I sometimes I find it a bit hard to be grateful for a lot of the things in my life, especially the ones that I fucking grinded really hard to get. So sometimes I'm not going to lie, I don't feel like gratitude is the appropriate feeling. But there is one thing that I'm immensely grateful for, and that's actually the pain that my parents gave me. And I think is what I've been feeling resentment for so many years without realizing that it was actually, a lot of fuel for me. Yeah. And it definitely gave me so many attributes and things that I'm using on a daily to actually help other people without realizing. That obviously people that have gone through stuff, depending on what they went through, they have to kind of develop certain skills, especially as kids, right? So they either become a bit more sensitive or they become better at reading people or they become more introspective. There's so many things that you gain through going through a hard life to an extent. And I think just going back to what we were saying earlier, I think for me, just building self-awareness is such a huge part of it is the first step and the last step to just continuing the work on healing, as you call it. And I think with that, it also comes the realization that pain is when you go through it and when you're able to elaborate it and use it in a constructive way, it gives you freedom.
100%. Our brain is the most powerful tool that we have, the most powerful organ that we carry in our body. And everything happens up here. And the brain can't distinguish between what's imagination and what's real. So that means we can manipulate it. We can manipulate whatever we're thinking about ourselves. Like, how they say fake it till you make it, right? I know a lot of people have
opinions.
Yeah, about it. But that could be your first stage of saying, yeah. That's the gateway to feeling good about it.
Yeah, you got to become a yes.
Yeah. Or I can be the boss lady or whatever. Like, you said something so interesting. When I was a boxer, I was a lot in my masculine energy, right? And because we were taught, like, being feminine is weak growing up. The feminist movement messed everything up for females that want to be looked after and be princesses, okay? And it was a conflict with being brought up in a family where the father was a breadwinner and the mum was the housewife. And there I am working, having to work, being sold this idea that you have to be independent. So whenever I met anyone dating and stuff, I approached it in a very masculine way. And I started arguing and, you're trying to compete with a man. It doesn't work, right? And as a boxer, obviously you have this, you see somebody, you see them in a physique, you see them broad shoulders. I had a proper boxer's physique in that time. And automatically people will assume that you are the most strongest person. Nothing hurts you. You're unbreakable. I was a bipolar, opposite of it. The most sensitive, the most empathetic, I cry at everything, right? Like I'm the eldest out of sisters and they're more stronger than I am. And when I realized, oh damn, I'm not that strong person as I perceive.
But we also need to define what strength means. Because for me, crying is not a sign of weakness.
You're probably one of the rare men that ever says that. For me, I learned how to cry after my depression years. And I found strength in that because I was able to talk about what was going on. Funny, isn't it? Yeah, I will cry all the time because out of frustration and anger. Like I could beat somebody up and I'll have no mercy.
Yeah, but actually when you cry, you're just letting go.
Yeah.
Crying a lot more than any other feeling is a bit more of a release.
But we're conditioned. We're conditioned not to be this and that. So like when people meet me now, I'll just be honest with who I am. I don't have to hide. I used to hide a lot from who I was, my true self, my authentic self.
What's next for you?
There's a lot of things in the pipeline. The work that I'm doing is needed for my community. That's one thing I know for sure. And yeah, let's see. I've got a lot of things coming up.
Thank you so much. When can people find you?
Fitness Reborn UK 1. And my website is www.naziakhatun.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, comment. I'll see you next time.